Mr. Harrison was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and a mansion filled with luxury. But despite all of his riches, there was one thing he struggled with deeply: trust. He often believed that people stayed around him only because of his money, not because of genuine loyalty or care. One day, driven by this doubt, he decided to put his longtime maid Clara and her young daughter Maya to the test. He came up with a secret plan. Mr. Harrison pretended to fall asleep in his grand living room, leaving his expensive watch and wallet in plain sight, just to see what would happen when he wasn't awake to watch them. In his mind, he wondered if they would take advantage of the moment or prove themselves honest. What he discovered, however, was something far more powerful than he ever expected. Instead of dishonesty, what unfolded before his eyes would leave him completely frozen in shock. This simple act of pretending to sleep would not only expose truth, but also teach Mr. Harrison a lesson that money could never buy: a lesson about honesty, love, and the true meaning of wealth. Mr. Harrison, the billionaire, had grown tired of wondering if the people around him were truly loyal or only drawn to his fortune. Suspicion lived in his heart, and he often felt that without his wealth no one would care about him at all. His maid Clara had worked faithfully in his home for years, and her young daughter Maya often accompanied her. Still, Mr. Harrison's doubts began to eat away at him. One afternoon, he devised a plan to test their honesty. He decided that he would pretend to fall asleep in his lavish living room, leaving his gold watch and wallet sitting openly on the table. If Clara or Maya were tempted, they would have every opportunity to take them. To make the test even more convincing, he intentionally let a few bills slip from his pocket as he leaned back and closed his eyes. "Now I'll see their true nature," he thought to himself, settling into the role of a sleeping man. With every second that passed, he waited in silence, curious and almost certain that greed would reveal itself. But what Mr. Harrison did not know was that his plan would lead to a revelation he never expected, one that would shake his heart more than any loss of money ever could. As Mr. Harrison pretended to sleep, waiting for dishonesty to reveal itself, Clara quietly entered the living room to check on her employer. She noticed the wallet and the gold watch lying on the table, and even saw the money that had slipped from his pocket onto the floor. For a brief moment, she paused, not out of temptation, but out of concern that he might lose something valuable without realizing it. Instead of pocketing anything, Clara gently bent down, picked up the bills, and carefully placed them back into his wallet. She then adjusted the blanket on the back of the sofa and draped it over him so he would not catch a chill. Her daughter Maya stood nearby, watching her mother's actions with innocent eyes, quietly learning what honesty and dignity looked like. Clara could have easily taken advantage of the situation, but she chose integrity, as she always had, even when life had been unfair to her. Humble in spirit and strong in character, she treated Mr. Harrison with respect, never once considering his wealth as an opportunity to enrich herself. Little did she know her simple act of humility and care was being silently observed, and it would soon leave the billionaire frozen with emotions he hadn't felt in years. As Clara finished tucking the blanket over Mr. Harrison, little Maya noticed the shiny gold watch glistening on the table. Her curious eyes lingered on it, and for a moment she reached her small hand toward it. Mr. Harrison, though pretending to sleep, kept his breath steady while his heart raced. This was the moment he thought he would finally uncover the truth. Surely the child's innocence would give way to temptation. But instead of slipping the watch into her pocket, Maya gently lifted it with both hands and whispered to her mother, "Mom, I think he forgot to put this away. What if someone else takes it?" Clara smiled softly and nodded, praising her daughter's thoughtfulness. Together they carefully placed the watch back into its case, making sure it was safe. Maya then glanced at Mr. Harrison, still asleep, and quietly added, "Even rich people need someone to take care of them." Those simple words pierced through Mr. Harrison's pride more deeply than he could have imagined. In that moment, he realized the test he had set wasn't exposing greed, it was exposing love, honesty, and values far richer than his wealth could ever measure. Mr. Harrison lay motionless on the sofa, his eyes still closed, but inside his heart was trembling. He had set this entire plan in motion to confirm his suspicion that everyone around him only cared about his wealth. Yet what he had just witnessed was the exact opposite. Clara had not only returned the money and watch without hesitation, but her young daughter Maya had also shown a pure heart untouched by greed. The billionaire realized that this was more than a test of honesty, it was a test of humanity, and it was he who was truly being judged. In their humility and compassion, Clara and Maya revealed values he himself had long forgotten. All his life Mr. Harrison had surrounded himself with people who flattered him, sought his favor, and lived in the shadow of his wealth. But in this quiet moment, with no audience, no contracts, and no gain at stake, Clara and her daughter had displayed what true loyalty, care, and integrity looked like. This was the real test, not of them, but of him. For the first time in years, Mr. Harrison began to question his own character. Was he a man defined only by riches, or was he capable of appreciating the richness of sincerity and love? The silence in the room was heavy, not with suspicion as before, but with revelation. The billionaire now understood that his fortune could buy servants' homes and luxuries, but it could never buy the purity of a child's heart or the dignity of a humble woman who chose honesty over opportunity. The true test had ended, and it left Mr. Harrison not triumphant, but transformed. At last Mr. Harrison could no longer keep up his act. Slowly he opened his eyes, and sat upright, his gaze fixed on Clara and little Maya. Both looked startled, unsure if they had done something wrong. With a shaky voice the billionaire admitted, "I wasn't really asleep, I was testing you." Clara's face paled, and she lowered her eyes, embarrassed that her honesty had been doubted after years of loyal service. But before she could speak, Mr. Harrison continued, his tone breaking with emotion. "I wanted to see if temptation would win. Instead, I saw honesty, humility, and love. I saw something money can't buy." He paused, looking directly at Maya, whose innocent eyes were still wide. "You reminded me of a truth I've ignored for too long. Wealth is worthless without trust, respect, and kindness." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she realized the weight of his words. For the first time, the man who had always hidden behind power and riches seemed vulnerable. The reveal of his plan had not exposed Clara or her daughter, it had exposed his own emptiness, and the lesson he had desperately needed to learn. Mr. Harrison took a deep breath, still shaken by what he had witnessed, and then smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened his usually stern face. He turned to Clara and said, "For years, I believed money was the only measure of worth. But today you and your daughter showed me something priceless." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a set of keys and placed them in Clara's hand. "These are for a new home. No more struggling to make ends meet, no more worrying if your child will have the future she deserves. Consider it not a gift, but a recognition of the honesty and dignity you've always lived by." Clara's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling as she tried to refuse, but he gently closed her fingers around the keys. Maya, still too young to grasp the full meaning, clapped her hands in excitement, whispering, "Mama, we have a home." Mr. Harrison's heart warmed at the sight. For the first time, giving felt richer than keeping. The reward he offered them wasn't just material, it was a new chapter of security, respect, and opportunity. In truth, though, the greater reward was his own awakening to a life where trust and kindness mattered far more than wealth. And so what began as a test of suspicion ended as a lesson in humanity. Mr. Harrison, the billionaire who thought he held all the power, discovered that true wealth was not locked away in his bank accounts, but alive in the hearts of those who lived with honesty and love. Clara's humility and Maya's innocence revealed that the greatest treasures cannot be bought, they are earned through trust, respect, and compassion. This story reminds us all that no matter how much money one has, it is character that defines a person's true value. In a world often divided by wealth, status, and prejudice, we are called to remember that kindness has no price tag and integrity has no substitute. Mr. Harrison walked away a changed man not because he gained something new, but because he finally understood what he had been missing all along. And perhaps the greatest lesson for us all is this: the true measure of a life well lived is not how much you own, but how deeply you care, how honestly you live, and how much light you bring into the lives of others.